Okay. I have the wrong part. Welcome to X-Men Evolution, episode 47 of Cyclops.
You didn't even take a break. Like, you just, like, slurred into it.
Yeah. An X-Men anime recap podcast. I'm Rod, and I had my script scrolled to the wrong place initially, so that's where I am at this week.
I'm JC. I still have to figure out what I'm going to do with that Lego build. We'll deal with that on social media. Cyclops is waiting for me as our weekly podcast series. We're going back and watching every single X-Men animated episode that we can find. This podcast started with the original 1992 X-Men the Animated Series, which was building up to the release of X-Men 97. I'm in full-fledged radio voice right now. Along the way, we also launched our companion show called the Xavier Files that had interviews with members of the X-Men community, including some of the voice actors for it. The goal is in next year we have musicians and some of the original 92 cast as well. But since season 2 of X-Men 97 is now a ways off, we're going back and we are in our second half of our first ever watch through. I mean, actually, it's like fourth quarter of our watch through of X-Men Evolution at this point.
Yeah, we're in the home stretch now.
Yeah. We are single digit episodes left.
Yeah. So, of a short season, right?
Yeah, it's only 9, so.
So some quick reminders. We're a recap show about a series that started over 20 years ago. What did we say, 24 years?
The other day, as of when we recorded, was the 24th anniversary.
So there will be spoilers for this episode. I think we're reiterating as we get closer to the finale, please don't spoil it for us in the comments. We're trying our best to stay away, even though it's been over 2 decades.
If we get this far and lose it in the last 5 episodes, I'm gonna lose my shit.
But if you don't want this episode spoiled for you, pause the podcast, watch the episode. They're real short. Without the commercials, they're less than 20 minutes. And come back. And we're currently not sponsored by or affiliated with Marvel Animation, Disney, or Disney Plus in any way. Although we mentioned last episode, if Marvel Snap wants to throw money at us.
Yeah, second dinner if you guys want. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the name of the company.
The company. So yeah, figuratively or literally, if you want to show up here and just throw money at me, if it's the right amount, I'll take it.
The right amount is not that high either. That's the good part. As long as it's legit legal tenure, it's solid, you know? So don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Facebook. We're not going to remind anybody after this week, but just in case you missed last week for some reason, given recent decisions about using content to fuel their AI, we're on the stance of Twitter can go fuck itself, and we are going to be sunsetting that account. Also, fuck that guy who owns it. And of course, make sure you follow us on your favorite podcast service.
Part of me hopes that this podcast lives on for so long that someone else owns it down the road, and it's like the next Mother Teresa or something, and then someone pulls up this clip of you saying fuck the guy that owns it. It's like, but that guy just literally fed thousands of orphans and donated his kidneys.
Both of them. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It's literally a miracle. And I said, fuck that guy.
Anyway, so just for a record, we're recording in November 7th, 2024.
So if shit's weird, you got context.
Yeah. Now on to the show. Today we're going to be talking about season 4, episode 4, titled Sins of the Sun. You know what's so funny? I didn't realize that's what the title was because the episode doesn't seem like that. So when I originally I copied the script over to the screen so I can see it, I was like, wait, did I watch that episode? And I was like, oh yeah, that was this one. Okay. But it originally aired on September 20th, 2003. Currently sits at a 7.0 star rating on IMDb. I do kind of agree. You mentioned to me that this would be a Legion episode, and
specifically for context, because Rod has watched Legion and I never have, and I was like, you're hosting this one because you'll have references outside of
I only watched the first, I think, 2 seasons. I need to go back and watch the rest of it. Having watched this episode, not that it would ever had a chance, because obviously there's 4 seasons of a really artistic show versus one 20-minute episode of an animated series. But man, they left so much. I mean, I don't know how much is a comic accurate or whatever, but I didn't recognize this character from the stuff that I saw.
Yeah.
But a side note, what was really funny is I don't know if you have your phone upgraded, but I'm on the new iOS, and I forgot that now instead of showing previews of text, it shows AI summaries. And so I think, what did you text me? Something like, this is a Legion episode.
Yes.
And so the preview that I got was episode 4 of Legion is based on the character David Haller. And so I was like, okay.
You're like, did John send that to me? No, I am not. I literally, because that's 18.1 and I have not updated it yet. I just took a look. Yeah. Because you sent that to me earlier and I was also confused. I'm like, what the fuck? I was like, I didn't send that.
Because in some instances it actually is helpful because like I'm especially on emails, like I'm on so many different either work or work adjacent like project things, and I'm a freelancer, so I'm working on like 20 different projects. So like the AI has so far been pretty good. Like, oh, this person's name in this email is responding to the thing about Tuesday or whatever. I'm like, okay, that's helpful, because then like, because generally the first line of an email isn't like gonna, people don't write what the rest of it's about. So this one's like, okay,
I love how I literally just said fuck Elon Musk for using our AI to train stuff, and now you're praising Apple's AI.
Now, to be fair, hopefully this is true. My understanding, the Apple intelligence is using a model within the device.
Yes.
I don't know what the other implications are of that, but in my understanding, this is like a non-pirated.
It's ethical use of AI.
I don't know enough to claim that 1,000%. Like, it's kind of a similar thing of like, I'm not a lawyer, please don't take legal advice from me. But as of right now, and my understanding, this is the closest to like ethical. Also, I just don't have a choice, because at some point when you like, you're going to be forced to update your thing, and it's just going to be there. But we're not going to do it voluntarily on formerly Twitter.
No, fuck it. It's still Twitter. I'm not calling it X. He can go fuck himself. Now that I don't care if he burns my fucking account, he could literally just go fuck himself.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy.
This show, I got excited for a little bit because I thought we were going to finally get to the fucking Mystique statue, and why the hell Kurt has not shown any emotion towards this, because we were on the cliff and there was like water and stuff. But then it just pans up and it's like, oh, this is a castle. They're like not even in New York, or if they are, we're being introduced to a new geography. But you come to realize pretty quickly, just based on the accents, they're in Scotland. And I didn't know these kids. I love Scotland. I don't know if this is based on an actual castle. Not any of the ones I've been to. I've been to Scotland a few times. But they reference the main character in this sequence named Lucas. And I thought it was a punk rock show because that's the music you heard. It turns out it's more like a party, like just an ongoing rave, essentially. It felt like, yeah,
but with like punk music, yeah.
Yeah, and so you kind of get the vibe that Lucas is a ladies' man because the girls all want to like, go off with him and stuff. And
then there was a girl that her character model looked like Risty too.
Yeah, so there was a couple of them. I was like, oh, these are people we know, but no.
Well, obviously, it's Risty is Mystique, so that creates a giant issue. But it was just weird that this character looked so much like her character model was Risty. So,
well, see, I was wondering if like we were going to meet like the real one,
Oh, like who Mystique
like maybe
probably murdered.
Yeah, well, maybe in this. Well, for a second, I thought maybe she didn't kill her, and that's why. Like she's overseas, so at that time, like it would be like less likely for them. I don't know.
Yeah,
but it's not that deep. But yeah, Lucas is like walking through the party. Like he gave the vibe of like what like a late '90s like TV magician. You know what I mean? Like not David Blaine, but like that kind of like setting like the making the Statue of Liberty float and set fire to things. Like that kind of like edgy '90s musician.
He also, from his character design, had like really like overdone brows. Like he kind of like was a little like Cro-Magnon with it, which reminded me of particularly Spike from Buffy when he was in vampire mode. Like he had a slightly deformed like brow ridge. So
yeah. It's funny. I never watched Buffy, so I don't know the characters, but you describing them, I remember that image from promos. It's funny, now that I think back on it, that Generation X movie that I think we're going to maybe sometime watch with Michelle Waffle.
Yeah, probably.
It very much has like that like Angel Buffy production vibe on it, like the prosthetics with the weird lighting and stuff.
Right.
But you see Lucas kind of work his way down through the ruins of the castle, and I don't know how much money these kids have. They were like able to outfit this castle with like working dungeons and stuff. Like I understand if they're already there, but there's like new mechanisms that are updated in this thing. And he's talking to someone named David, and he's like, call him. And I knew this is like one of the few characters I know because I watched the Legion show. I was like, okay, so this is Xavier's kid. And then you hear the phone ring, but it's a weird perspective. You only see Lucas, and then it goes over to the mansion, the X mansion, and Xavier's like dead asleep, which I know I'm not supposed to think this hard about it, that the time zone is not right. I was
gonna say, what is the time difference? Is it only like 6 hours?
It's like 6 hours. So, but if it shouldn't be nighttime both in Europe and like. I guess
if Xavier went to bed at like 9 o'clock at night and it's like 5 in the morning there, like whatever that time change is, maybe that's your closest scenario where these kids are literally up until all hours.
Let's go with that.
Yeah.
And so
there's also wonkiness with the time change later in the episode too. So yeah.
So he wakes up and he's like, and he hears the voice and it's like, hey, Dad. And then you see like that face that, I don't know. I always call it like, because I've been a touring musician I was a touring musician for a couple of decades, that like, you don't think that you have a kid out there, but you always imagine like, what if you get that call? And that's the face he had.
I don't think we need to get into this right now, Rob. It specifically is like, I need your help, Father, and that's where the shock thing happens. And if there's ever going to be a cold open that like crashes to the animated intro, that's a great like line to end a cold open on. So
yeah. And when he comes back from that, they're in the X jet. I forget what we're calling it. This one,
I think this one's called the X jet. Yeah.
Jet. And Xavier's explaining like he didn't know he had a son. And what was her name? Was his ex-wife's name is Gabrielle Haller.
Gabrielle Haller. Yep. Which, if you did watch Legion, the last name Haller, obviously you knew who it was with David, but that just confirms it even further for you. But yeah, he's like having this conversation with Storm, and like Jean and Scott are like 6 feet away, like trying to whisper around the telepath.
Yeah, and so then Storm's like, why don't you kids go call and check in on Kitty? You know, like, and so they flip over to the mansion where Beast is like in charge, but he's doing the what was that movie, Mr. Mom?
Yes.
Thing. So he's like good at it.
He's like, Beast. Of course he's good at it.
As all the kids are running by him, he's like throwing them the thing. Even like was it Amara? I can't remember.
Amara's hair was wet.
Yeah.
And she didn't want to leave, and it's like, oh, okay, here, and plugged into Berserker as the way to like do the hair dryer.
So I only hesitated when I say that because I was like, wow, that was like the weird one to pick because she has heat, right? Like that's her one power. But anyway,
don't think too deep on it, Rob.
But otherwise, he did like all the lunches and stuff as they were running out. And then
Cannonball is going to murder somebody. Cannonball is just a fucking menace.
He's the opening scene of Boys, right? Like that's him.
Yeah, he's A-Train without controlling his direction. He's just like, I'm bouncing on shit.
And he actually calls him Sam in this. And then that's when like the FaceTime call comes in on the side. Oh, it's funny. It's the like 60s style FaceTime, you know, like on Get Smart or something, where it's like a tube television on the wall that dials in. And it's Scott and Jean checking in. And we find out then that like Kitty has the flu. And then Beast is like, oh, she's got company because Kurt's also got the flu.
So before we get into that, I just have to point out, I'm still frustrated as hell with the time change of this series because we've acknowledged that the stuff that has happened between the premiere, when they got out of school, it's been like 2 weeks. Maybe there's another week for all the Brotherhood, maybe 2 additional weeks. And then the stuff with Logan in the last episode, maybe that's another week later. There was no summer break for these fucking kids. Yeah. Like, they literally just like were like, yep, we're just permanently in school. And that's me being so nitpicky that you made it into a clip for Instagram.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funnier because the way it aired too, because there wasn't even like a real life summer break. because sometimes that's what shows would count on, right? Was they would go away on a break, like at the beginning of summer, and when they come back, all the characters are like, "Woo, we had a crazy summer, right?" And then they move on. But that wasn't
especially like the Power Rangers era of shows. Like that was like, oh, it was a funny summer, wasn't it? We had our break.
Yeah, but to their credit, their seasons are like 60 some odd episodes long or something.
True. And then, like, Saved by the Bell, we did get those, them working all at the beach club to acknowledge the summer 1 year, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those episodes. I saw, there was a video I watched of, like, 90s shows that, only got one season, and they named Tailspin. And I was like, I remember that being way more than one season.
Was it, like, 96 episodes or something?
It was a 64-episode season, so I was like, oh, okay, so that was, like, every weekday for probably a school year, or something. That's
and I know we've mentioned it, so sorry for the people who are saying we talk about the same shit. But like people remember the Green Ranger story that happened in like episode 37 or something like that.
Yeah,
like that,
halfway.
like that was still season 1, and it was in the 30s when that happened. And it's like that's the shit I remember the most. So that meant there were 30 full episodes before that ever got touched.
A little side note, but it just makes me laugh. I love the people pointing out in that scene where Tommy comes back as the White Ranger. I can't remember her name. The Pink Ranger.
Kimberly?
Yeah, Kimberly. She passes out. And as kids, we never realize it. But, like, no one helps her up. She just stays on the ground as everyone else talks to Tommy.
Yeah.
And then at the end, after they all have their talk, they're like, how did Tommy survive? They get through all that exposition. Then Tommy walks over and picks her up off the ground. He's like, come here, you silly goose. He's like, she probably had a concussion because she
probably
just dropped anyway. So here, so there,
Kurt's also got the flu. Yes.
Yeah, and this is where on the X jet that they talk about Gabrielle Haller and it being his David being his son, and he's just now like finding out all this stuff.
But we also see with the Kurt and Kitty stuff, anytime that he sneezes, he starts teleporting. Then Kitty brings up, because Hank goes to check on her, she just keeps having that nightmare of showing up to her school in pajamas, which ends up being like the running joke of the episode. And he's like, yeah, some of us still have that nightmare. Yeah, I've never had that nightmare. I've never had the show up in my pajamas or underwear nightmare. I've had the I can't get into my locker one, though.
Oh, wow.
That's, like specifically not remembering my combination.
I have the in public naked all the time for some reason. I don't know what psychological reason. I think there is one, like afraid of being vulnerable or something, which that tracks.
Fair.
But that was a cute little B plot in this. Still kind of like wondering, like, Kurt does not seem nearly as upset as we last left him with the Mystique situation, but whatever. He's got the flu. Maybe that. But also, like, wow, they've just like really jumped the shark on how his powers were ever explained to me, because he's not only is he not seeing where he's teleporting to, like he's not even conscious.
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be funny, even though it could be gross in the context of this show, it would be funny if they did a joke about where he teleports into a wall, but instead of killing him, he like breaks it or something, that would have been funny. Or if he's like kind of phased into it and then Kitty has to help him out, and that's the thing, but that never really happened. They go on another little mission. But yeah,
this episode, even combined with the last episode, like the B story is maybe like 60 to 90 seconds of total footage. Like it's such a non-factor to the episodes.
It's more of a comedic relief, right?
Yeah, it's a gag.
And so then at another mansion, Xavier and the team show up looking for David. So we figure out this is like Gabrielle's mansion. Apparently everybody in this series is wealthy, or everybody Xavier's ever been married to.
I was going to say everybody associated to Xavier is wealthy.
So, or maybe that's why maybe they're wealthy, because like they took all of his shit. I mean, he just has so much, or I don't know.
There's no hello at the door or anything. Like, she's like kind of like excited to see him, and he's like, oh, have you talked to the cops yet? Like, he literally is just like, what the fuck? Like,
she's like, this is why I asked for a divorce, and also didn't tell your son about you.
I also liked how they show the shot of the inside of the house too, and all I put is in all capital letters "rich" because of just how expensive. Like the door is 2 stories tall.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's like 6 chandeliers and shit. Yeah.
And the painting on the mantle. And
Yep.
the painting on the mantle really, I think, is there to show us that like there's nobody else in the picture. It's a single mom raising her son. I think it's just the 2 of them.
Yeah.
But then we see in like the prison dungeon thing that we saw earlier, where David was like kind of implied to be. We actually see David, and he's a different person than Lucas, supposedly. And he just kind of parkours up to the grill at the top. And
he pushes the grate open very impressively. Like, I don't know how you physically did that, but he did it. Yeah.
Yeah, because that thing's supposed to be like not manhole cover heavy, but pretty heavy, right? The idea is like a human could like sustain.
If you're holding yourself up on a ledge, you don't have the strength to push that metal thing up. Unless you're a crazy powered mutant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he works his way up to the party. They really made it look like he was going to go covert. Like he was just going to he rolled up his sleeves and like untucked his shirt and he was going to like walk around. Like immediately gets caught.
Yeah.
And he gets cornered. I started to write the note that he jumps off the cliff, but they cut before they show that. And we just don't see what happens to him, which
I'd imagine the little punk hoodlums just kind of like beat the shit out of him kind of scenario. Yeah. Or I think there's also that possibility of this, like, you know, if you haven't watched the fucking episode, then that's your own fault. But him being Lucas, I think maybe the scenario in hindsight is he transformed back into Lucas and everybody's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's why. So that was, it makes sense after the fact, where it's like either he transformed back to Lucas, or like I wasn't quite clear on his powers. Like it feels like a manifestation that just disappeared, or something, and the punks are all just like used to it. They're like, oh, okay, well at least he's not a problem now.
Yeah, where he like Lucas gave permission. If you ever see me in nerd mode, beat me up. You know?
Yeah, or just like make sure I don't go like leave the premises, and then you'll just kind of like fade away or something. I don't know.
Right.
Then we get back to Xavier and Gabrielle arguing about like not telling him that he had a son, and like he's like, "What did you tell him?" And they get back to like the old married couple things, like "You were never here." It's so funny, which is like, I guess she might have a point, because like you said, they didn't say hi to begin with. But she was like, "Yeah, I just told him you ran away one day," and like he didn't push back on that, so it was like, did he just like leave one day? Like,
so. We've talked about Charles is not great in relationships in every iteration of Charles. So
probably
they probably got in a fight and he said fuck this and is like, I'm packing my bags.
Yeah, I'm gonna raise.
I would not be shocked that she was like, you know, maybe what, like 2 months pregnant when it's too early to know kind of scenario. Yeah. He was unaware. He's not mind reading her stomach to see if she's actually like pregnant at random. So he probably was just like, I've had enough of your shit. I'm going to go be rich in America.
Yeah. It's like, and raise 20 kids as 20 strangers as my kids.
Yeah. None of these are my children.
And then we see outside of the mansion, Lucas is peeping Tom like into the mansion. And then he like pans his eyes up and sees Jean. He's like, "Who's that?" And it like almost became like not a Porky's reference, but you know, like that like 80s sitcom, like the guys in the bushes like watching the girl.
Yeah, there was a little creepy vibe to it, but luckily she wasn't actually like, you know, getting naked or anything like that. It was just her and Scott searching the room. And then there was like that little funny moment where Scott's like, I hope I never go missing because I don't want people searching through my stuff. And Jean's like flirty, like, oh, well, what do you got hidden? I was like, that's a, okay, got it.
They're probably not going to come back to that, but I like to believe that the writers put that in there as like something to open up later, you know? Because that'd be a funny thing to come back to, where he goes missing and then she discovers some crazy family secret about him, because it's the Summers family, right? So there could be
it's the Summers family. Yep.
Yep. Then Jean catches in her peripheral vision like a little boy, and her instinct is to go chase him, but like it's not her house.
Although I feel like Gabrielle should have said, "Oh, don't worry, there's a little blonde kid running around. He's ours."
Yeah. And we find out, like, his name is Ian, and he's technically... this woman is, like, very welcoming. She's like, yeah, David brought him home one day. It's like, I would have questions.
He found him on the street, and he doesn't talk.
Yeah, that would be questions. That's the beginning of every horror movie.
Mm-hmm. That's like Children of the Corn shit right there.
Yeah. But speaking of, since she can't find him, Jean runs outside to try to find the strange mute boy. Once again, horror movie.
Yeah.
And because she says, well, if he can't speak, then I can read his mind. I was like, okay. Like, we're going to interrogate this child now.
Fuck, interrogate all the children.
Right. But before she gets a chance to non-consensually read this little boy's mind, Lucas appears and captures Jean in a ring of fire, which I had questions about, because I was like, well, is this supposed to be pyro now or something? Like, I don't remember. Like I said, I don't know what Legion's thing is in the comics, but in the show that I watched, like, maybe telekinesis, but not like make fire happen.
So I believe in the comic, and I could be wrong on this one, Legion has the different personalities within him, and each different personality effectively gives him a different power. Okay. I could be wrong about that, but I think it's kind of similar to the girl from Doom Patrol, who has a very similar thing. Like, somebody takes over, and when they're taking over, their shit is what happens, essentially.
Gotcha.
So.
And just a little plug, if you watched Agatha All Along and you liked Aubrey Plaza in that, I mean, if you like Aubrey Plaza in general, but specifically in her role in Agatha All Along, it might be worth giving Legion a try, because I could tell that someone watched her in Legion and was like, oh, we need that for Agatha. There's a character like this.
Oh, so, yeah. Pyrokinesis is one of his powers.
Oh, is it? Okay, well, there you go.
Straight up. Legion's powers, according to Google, it's like the 7th one down, but it's there.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
So I learned something. The Legion show, Aubrey Plaza's in that show too, and she's also a very mysterious character, and I can't get too much into it without giving away many spoilers, but also, as long as you're okay with like really psychedelic shows, like, I don't think you're supposed to know what's happening for most of the first season, and that's partially by design. But they do deal with, so like, they kind of have this semi-grounded approach to, it's an X-Men adjacent world, but I think the showrunners said that they weren't technically allowed to be part of like the Fox universe of X-Men, but they wanted to make a show that was so good that maybe the powers that be would be forced to include them, so they made it like open enough to tie in, Xavier from the Fox universe and stuff, but they don't mention him. In the show, David Haller is diagnosed as a very young child with schizophrenia. Which
is accurate to the comic of multiple personalities.
And he gets put into a psych ward, and things just get really wild. That's where all the psychedelic stuff comes in. And then you can't figure out if Aubrey Plaza's character is real. I say Aubrey Plaza too, not just because of her name.
Yeah.
You don't know her name for a little while, and then you do, and then it becomes weird, and then you just see her thing, at least for the first couple seasons, is such an interesting reveal. So smart. It's just unlike any show I've ever seen since then or before. So that's how they kind of deal with like this characterization of it. So like there were hints of it, like the you said like the different personalities and stuff like were in there, but like this was like I wasn't clear on like how it manifested in this show, because like we find out later that Ian is one of David's personalities and stuff. I was like, is that a projection, or does he like physically like I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird, because it's like, looking back on it, and I didn't rewatch it ever, like, were there times where they were in the same, or were they around at the same time and stuff like that? But I think in hindsight they probably weren't, but I wasn't paying attention to it specifically as it was happening.
I think that there was one scene where they were kind of, but I also couldn't tell if that was like supposed to be like a, because there's a point where like Xavier goes into his head and stuff. It was like a lot of, I don't know, it's supposed to be a projection, but they don't come back to him, so I guess they didn't care. Yep. So they Lucas captures Jean in the fire ring, And then
it does like a cool mental distortion, like creepy thing though too. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in the house, wait, so this has to be the next morning then, right?
Well, that's the thing. I was actually saying like this is where I was confused about the timeline or the like literal like time zones and stuff, because it's the next morning, but it doesn't imply that it's the next morning over in Scotland.
Yeah. I don't want to do that math right now.
Nope.
So in the mansion, X mansion, Kitty runs out of tissues because she, when you're sick. I don't know if I've ever sneezed a lot when I had the flu, but like I get using a lot of tissues and stuff when you're all stuffy and stuff. Mm-hmm. So she goes to Kurt's room, and he had just sneeze teleported under his bed. She's like, mm-hmm. You silly goose, like what are you doing? So she like grabs his tail, which like
is that your new phrase? You've said silly goose twice tonight.
Oh really? Have I?
Yes.
So she like grabs his tail, which is like that sounds horrific for anybody, especially somebody like anthropomorphic like that. But like and then as she's holding his tail, he sneezes again and teleports, and we heard it projected earlier, was it telegraphed earlier?
Telegraphed. Yep.
They appear like in the hallway of the high school, or no, on the front door.
On the front door of the high school.
Yeah, and she's like, "Oh my god!" And she's like, "Wake up! You have to take us back." And then he sneezes again, and then they're on the teacher's desk in front of the classroom.
And not only is she in her like pajamas, one really like random thing I noticed to help showcase that Kitty was sick is they colored her lip a different color. Oh. And it was like, even like, oh, this is Kitty without makeup. Like, so it's like Kitty herself already not happy with how her appearance is.
Yeah. And I guess Kurt has been blue in public by now. People know.
Everybody from the team has been outed at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, they're never going to come back to this again. I just wonder like what the aftermath of that is, of like Kurt not knowing, but then finding out later that he really was like asleep in the school, out in front of all the kids, and then all the other places that Kitty mentions later. So
she's also dragging him in the hallway, like by his tail. He sneezes again, and then they teleport into like the downtown area, and then there's like, the car drives by, and she gets splashed with like gross water and stuff.
Yeah, with the flu, the poor girl.
Yeah, she's kind of like legit a victim here. Like she wasn't like bitchy and getting like her just desserts or anything. She's just like in a sucky scenario right now.
Yeah, and Kurt, he's like me, and when I was in college, like I slept like a rock. This is before everything hurt. I was talking to a friend today that's like much younger than me, and
before everything hurt.
He was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be in a few years. I'm gonna be turning 30." And I was like, "Any advice?" And I was like, "I always tell the same thing. Everybody, stretch more than you think you need to." And he's like, "Really? Is that? I always thought that was a joke. Like, you think like does stuff really hurt?" And like, dude, I'm laying down right now while I'm talking to you, and all my joints still hurt. It just becomes a baseline. Mm-hmm. Like, and he's like, "Oh wow." I was like, "Yeah." So go to the gym. Work. Get your protein. And so then we get back to Jean and Scott. Jean's wakes up in the castle handcuffed.
He undoes her like chain things.
Okay, that's what it is.
Because he's like doing the whole like, oh, you should stay and you should feel chill and hang out. So he's unlocking her but not letting her go.
Oh.
And that's where they have like their little like telekinetic fight.
That's right, because what I'm thinking of happens later. Because then Scott shows up to the castle and Jean finds him at the party. So yeah, so she's free to roam the party, but not to leave it.
Right.
And so she's like, "Hi, don't let him see you." And then Scott is the dude, and he's like, "I don't care." He's like, "Is that the guy?"
He comes in like a bat out of hell too. He's like, "I'm just gonna walk through and not be nonchalant," and every like punk is just giving him dirty looks and shit. I do like that they literally have Lucas say, "Oh, looks like the boyfriend's here to crash the party," and it's like,
yeah,
have they had the conversation yet? Like, we've been asking this for like 12 episodes now.
He just inferred it from peeping through the window.
Yeah. And then Lucas is just like telekinetically tossing them both around like they're nothing. Like we know this is not a Phoenix version of Jean. Yeah. But damn, like, she's getting tossed around.
And he even says that too, right? He was like, "Oh, you're just not powerful. You're more power." Oh, because that's when he like knocks her into the dungeon thing, and basically buries her. He's like, "You're more powerful than most, but not that much."
Yeah. Also has people put Scott in like the man in the iron mask helmet too.
That's right, and that's another thing. Scott couldn't zap Lucas, so I was like, "Wow, like this power set, man."
Yeah, when he got shot, it was like he had like a weird like armor reflection on him too.
And I didn't know if that would have been this show's version of like, "Oh, we're related somehow," or something, you know?
No, I think it's just he's just that powerful scenario.
Yeah. My next thing was like Xavier and Storm almost hit Ian.
Yes,
with their vehicle.
Yep. I love that Storm is driving. Xavier has to suggest to her that she should maybe make it easier to see, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I should do that." Like, that wouldn't have been her instinct.
You know what? I knew I liked Storm anyways, but I like that we're on the same page, because people tell me that stuff all the time. Like, right, you should just do this thing that's very easy and accessible for you to do. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, that thing.
Yeah. So they almost murder a child, which is the theme for this show. And then Xavier's like, "Oh, I'm going to telekinetically go into this kid's head." And then it's like he has like a feedback loop. And then he sees the castle, and then Ian runs off.
And see, this is what makes me think that there's different manifestations of everybody, because that's more plausible to think about Ian being there and then Lucas still being at the castle at the same time, instead of like this like jumping around kind of thing. But it still makes me question, like, is this like a multiple situation where there's like a physical creation, or is it like
like, is he manifesting the second body? Yeah. But I also feel like at one point there had to have been David and Ian in the same place for the mom to accept this child wandering her home.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Like, he had to have at least said, "I found the kid," right?
I think
and the kid was like holding his hand or something.
Unless the mom is just
that bad a mom.
Yeah, kind of like Xavier, and she's in like, there's like one scene where he's like, "I found a kid," and then cut to another scene where she sees the kid, but doesn't ever like bother to try to see them together.
It sounds like a horror movie. Like, It literally does. Like, that should not work that way.
Like The Shining.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So Jean in her dungeon thing proves Lucas immediately wrong, because without a whole lot of effort, she breaks down the wall. She can't get up like he suggested, but she can break through the wall. And David,
yeah, he put this like big seal on the top of it, but also has very weak walls on the side.
And so she finds out that David's in the next, I don't know, jail cell or whatever, over. And David reveals that this whole thing is a trap. So Lucas can challenge Professor Xavier to like a 1-to-1 telekinetic off or something.
Brain to brain is the phrasing, which is really gross.
Yeah. And I think this is where some of the clever writing is, because I think that was supposed to be like the red herring twist, right? It's like, oh, the twist. This is the real thing. Before the reveal that it's the same person.
Well, there's also a quick exchange between the two of them where he's like, he can't trust his father, and Jean is telling him, "No, it's your dad's actually not at fault. He didn't know. Your mom lied." And that's when they hear the music, and simultaneously Xavier is arriving at the front of this place, and they're making their way up the stairs.
Yeah. So.
And again, they say brain to brain, which is gross.
And at that point, everybody gets reunited. Like Xavier and Storm are there and everything. David meets Xavier. And then things just really hit the gas at this point. Like,
yeah, they do.
And there's like maybe half a line of like a reconciliation. And then we just like do a speed run through like, oh, Ian is David and Lucas and all the personnel. But then you find out it's not just that he's creating things like multiple, like at will. He actually has that DID where like they're all fighting personalities, like trying to gain dominance of, I don't even say body. It's like the main consciousness, because clearly they have different manifestations of each other or something.
Right. One thing that we kind of glossed over earlier is there is mention, though, that Ian is loyal to Lucas, which in versions of Legion that I've read, there's kind of like the dominant personalities that are like taking sides inside of him, too. So it's not like they're all vying for dominance. It's like, I'll support this personality because they'll let me out once in a while, even though I know I can't beat that one on my own. If they let me out to play, I'll deal with them being the lead. So.
Yeah. And so then Xavier, then once again, they do the nice little subversion here. You think it's just going to be the classic, like, Xavier goes in and helps him unlock his mind thing, and they start that way.
He puts him in a bubble.
Yeah. But in the end, he kind of just kills David and Ian. Like, that's what I kind of got out of that.
I didn't get it as killed. I think it was like essentially put them in a jail cell.
Okay, because
the bubble's like a cell to me, not a death.
It's just the way that Lucas worded it. He's like, you sent them home, and I was like, oh, wait, what did that mean?
Sent him away.
Away, okay.
Away, yep.
But they don't even really deal with that, and then Xavier just goes home.
Yeah, Lucas is obviously the dominant personality and power set, and he just kind of like flies off and fucks off.
Yeah. And like you said, we never see him again.
Yep. Gabrielle is crying. You get sad Xavier. Yeah. And then they just get on the plane, and Beast is welcoming back. Xavier is totally dejected, and Kitty and Kurt finally get back to the room. Kitty is filthy. Kurt is fine. He wakes up and it thinks it was all like, oh, I had the weirdest dream. And then she like whacks him with a pillow. And it's like, this show hasn't been shy about ending on a sad note, like when it was meaningful.
Yeah.
I feel like Xavier losing his son because he fucked up. I don't know. Interjecting that with the Kitty and Kurt stuff didn't feel authentic to me. So
someone there was like, we cannot like end with it. And then,
but
like, when he's allowed.
But they do still end with it because it goes back to him and Storm having a quick conversation. It's like, I lost him before I ever even found him. So it still ends on a sad note, but you had like, here's a little joke in between. It's like, oh, okay.
This is that I remember now, that last little bit with him and Storm. That's when I wanted Allison Seeley Smith Storm, because this Storm actually says something reasonable. She's like, we'll find him together. Allison Seeley Smith Storm would have been like, no, we all lost him together.
And Xavier just looks at her and goes, what the fuck did you just say to me?
But I know this is not that kind of show. I kind of wanted to see what the interaction with Xavier and Gabrielle was after that. She's like, you what? And then how he leaves, like if he
like, did they drop her back off at her house? Yeah. Kind of thing? Like in their van that they took to Scotland, they like drove her back quietly, and it's like, you could get out now. Yeah. This is your fault for not telling me I had a son. Like, those are those conversations that he was probably psychically screaming them, and she was unaware of it. So.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like there's so much bottled trauma right now because we have the dome, which everyone's just like, well, that we gave it a shot.
Yeah, we tried for 4 hours.
And then murdering Mystique, which Rogue has just not been seen.
Yeah, she was seen in Kelly's office, and that was it.
Yeah, and even with this scene with all the kids going to school, she wasn't going to school, but she also wasn't in the 6 scenes. Kurt, even though he was sick, he seems pretty chipper now, not like a kid that, still mourning.
Saw his mom get shattered in front of him. Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a weird little episode. This feels like cruise control to me a little bit. Like it could have gone almost anywhere.
I do think, because we do know, spoiler for 5 episodes left, they do not address Legion again for the rest of the series. But I do not think they went into it with the intent of it being a lingering story. I do think that it was going to be, the intention was to bring him back in the next season, to give him a moment. Especially because some of the things that I have heard alluded to as to what the finale alludes to, and I'm being vague on purpose, the story that it alludes to actually has a lot to do with David. And then they just, because they never got that final season, you don't get that story at all. So
Well, there's something to look forward to.
Ish.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't have much more to say about this. I like the Legion show better than this episode, but this wasn't bad. It was fine. It's like a little filler episode. Do you have anything?
Yeah. What I did find funny was so obviously because I'm the one who upstates the run of show and stuff like that, I get nervous about fucking it up. And this was a time where the rating of your last episode, where you were the host, was the same as this rating. So I was like, I double checked it to make sure it wasn't like when I was like, Mojo got a 7.3. Sure. It was not the case.
Fun. Yeah, so it was okay. Well, thanks for joining us. If you have any thoughts, make sure to drop them in the comments for either the YouTube upload or official Instagram post about this episode. If you like what you heard, we'd appreciate the podcast or rating. Man, it's the end of the night. Rating on the podcast app you're choosing. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, and if straggler Castbox listener again is on here, tell your friends about us, because we're still trying to become number one on Castbox, even though we went the other way and lost somebody.
Yeah, we actually lost a Castbox person because we talked about being in live video.
Yeah, so now they're on YouTube, so we moved them over.
You know, Rod, we tried. We did. We gave it a good shot. I don't think we're ever going to be number one on Castbox, sadly.
All right, well, now that we've said it.
Now all of a sudden, Castbox numbers through the fucking roof.
I just realized I have Kurt on my shirt. John got me this last Christmas, but it was too late to wear, so I'm wearing it now.
I forgot that I had gotten you that, to be totally honest.
That's amazing. Yeah, you got me a pun shirt. Xmas.
Shut up.
But Kurt's putting the star on the tree. It's cute.
What's great is I know it's going to be clear on the camera for you, but because of all the artifacting as you're moving, I'm just seeing a blue blur in the middle, and it can't see. I know what the shirt is, but I just like as you're moving, like your camera is not having it right now.
Oh yeah, same. When you were showing off the Lego set earlier.
Oh yeah,
I was like,
I can't see any of that shit.
Nice. I'm nodding and just trusting you're being accurate about everything you're saying. All right. Good night, folks.
5 episodes left.